Welcome, everybody, to our panel this evening. I think there's quite a few hundred of you here. Thank you so much for giving up your time, and I hope we can be helpful. It is a panel offering advice and support for all the parents who may feel overwhelmed and in need of guidance after the pandemic. I'm hosting it on behalf of the charity Beyond, which is a youth mental health charity that raises money to help other organisations and schools. Beyond is committed to giving grants which will help make a difference to the mental health of young people in the UK. And this event tonight is sponsored by Meta. So my name is Lorraine Candy. I'm a mum of four, a journalist and author, and I specialise in writing about parenting for national newspapers and magazines. My first book, Mum, What's Wrong With You, which is about parenting teenage girls, was a Sunday Times bestseller last year. And I also co-host a podcast called Postcards from Midlife, which supports midlife mums parenting adolescents. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you are here because you will have read about the decline in mental health of children and young people following the pandemic. There have been so many consistent headlines. I'm sure that's impacted on your family life. And much of that will have been discussed today at the Mental Health Festival Beyond held. But we are here to say, please don't panic. There are many ways you can support your children and teens and help them navigate these changing and challenging situations, both at home and at school. We have got some brilliant experts on the panel tonight who can give some really good support and guidance. Thank you to everybody who sent in questions. I just want to say we won't be able to answer them specifically, but we are going to be covering the themes that your questions brought up. And we can't take questions this evening, but we will put a list of resources mentioned and many other resources on Beyond's website and a link to watch this again. So in case you miss anything or you don't get the actual specifics. So it is Children's Mental Health Week. And if you do share a link afterwards, please make sure you tag and mention Beyond. So I think it's time to meet our expert panel. I'm going to introduce them one by one, and then I'm going to ask some of the questions. So say hello to Jude Rackman from Place to Be. Jude is a registered counsellor, parent training mentor who joined Place to Be in 2021. He's got over 7 years experience delivering counselling and therapeutic services for adults and children. And he has been working, supervising parenting practitioners and within local authorities in the NHS for over 17 years. Carrie Grant is here. Carrie Grant MBE, is an award-winning broadcaster, vocal coach, leadership coach and campaigner. Carrie has 4 children and she is a passionate campaigner about adoption, autism, ADHD, invisible disability and inclusion. Carrie and Tylen Grant are actually patrons of Beyond. Kate Silverton is here. She's the BBC broadcaster and journalist and also author of There's No Such Thing as Naughty, an engaging guide which distills decades of neuroscience down to a simple concept to explain how children's behaviour is shaped by brain development and their emotional attachment. She's also a mother of 2 young children and she is training to be a children's counsellor working with Place to Be and the Anna Freud National Children's Centre. We have Gurpreet Singh, who is a father of 4 and founder of the first online Sikh parenting community platform, Sikh Parenting. After a career pivot from IT in the banking industry, Gurpreet is now a passionate mental health advocate and he runs men's peer support groups and manages an engagement support team for the charity Mind. So this is a panel with a lot of expertise covering a huge variety of ages and enormous personal and professional experience. So I think really the best way to start is to kind of ask all of you the main question that the theme of the main question that kept coming up, because this is about parenting and the stress after the pandemic. So children of all ages and parents of all ages have been overwhelmed, I think, by what everyone has been through. And I think the main challenge in a situation like this is change and dealing with change. So really, I think a good place to start is to get some kind of specific strategies on how we can support our children on a day-to-day basis and our adolescents and each other dealing with massive change. Carrie, what do you think?
Oh, I was thinking, I hope you go to someone else first, just to see what everyone, all these guys are so expert. So for us, I think one of the most important things when navigating change is learning to live with discomfort. And I think this is something that as societies, we don't get used to doing. We're like, we don't want to do that. We don't want to feel uncomfortable. We want to feel good the whole time. And every parent will say, I just want my child to be happy. And I think we really need to look at, is that actually what we want? Or do we want our children to be able to navigate happiness, sadness, jealousy, joy, peace, and all the myriad millions of emotions that are out there. I think that it's about broadening out some of those emotional, the sort of the sense of where we can go emotionally, and allowing ourselves to feel uncomfortable. Life brings up things that make us feel uncomfortable, and sitting with that. So for us as a family in our home, it's about making space to allow those comfortable feelings to rise up. They could be in challenging behaviors, they might be in destructive behaviors, they might be in self-destructive behaviors, but how we sit with them and how we help our children to process those feelings has been a really fundamental part of us navigating change through this time.
And Judah, I guess you've been kind of on the front line a bit with this, and I know sort of a lot of parents I speak to want to fix everything. I think Carrie makes a brilliant point. We can't fix this, can we? What are you hearing, and what are you advising with kind of parents and children's on, dealing with cases of extreme change, I guess?
Yeah, I think lots of parents that we speak to kind of talk about this feeling of needing other places they can get support and advice, and feeling a bit isolated in what they're experiencing, and not knowing where to go to speak to someone about, whatever parenting challenge that might be. I think it's one of the reasons why Place to Be created some of the resources we have, like Parenting Smart, which is a website that has lots of kind of advice and support for parents to kind of just get some key ideas on how you can do some of these things we're talking about with our kids, managing change transitions, etc. So I think some of that is around parents just knowing where they can get reliable sources of information, and knowing that there are some reliable sources of information out there. But as a parent, I mean, I'm a parent of 3 sons. I don't always know where to go. It's knowing that I've got somewhere that can show me this is a good source of information too. And I've experienced that even with my own kids, that sometimes I need to know who can I ask about this particular thing that we're going through, and where can I get some support around that, and feeling that that's okay. So that's what we're kind of hearing from parents, is that they need that place they can go to.
And Kate, with younger children then, and the parents of younger children, during the pandemic, there's been, that's a very different experience of early childhood than, it's a very lonely experience of early childhood. What are you hearing from parents and children, and what's your thoughts around strategies that you can, either at home or at school, actually?
Oh, so much to say on this. We're picking up on the points that have been made there, and I completely agree. So my focus is in the sort of the younger years, sort of 0 up to 12. And actually, I wrote the book, There's No Such Thing as Naughty, because I wrote it in the first lockdown as a mum with 2 young children, and finding it frankly horrific to be at home, expected to homeschool and all the rest of it. And I think I just really wanted to share that experience so that parents don't feel alone. We're not meant to parent alone. That's the first thing. It's too hard. And I think we've forgotten that actually not so long ago, with our more sort of traditional communities, we would have lived with an extended family very nearby to help and support us. So the first thing I think for parents is, please don't feel that you are getting it wrong because you're somehow doing it wrong, because we're all living in very abnormal circumstances right now, and we're doing the best we can. And as Donald Winnicott said, the great sort of psychoanalyst, said, we only have to be good enough. And it's really important to hold on to that. There's a lot that we can do with our children, all children. The first thing I would say is the greatest gift we can give our children is emotional regulation. And that means, as Carrie says, all emotions are good. Anger, all of them. What we want is to give our children the gift of being able to express those emotions safely. So I'm working as a counsellor now. So as you said, I'm training to be a child psychotherapist, but I'm actually working in schools as we speak. And the first thing is in connection, relationships, and that emotional regulation. And that's what we've all lost, is that connection and the relationships. We are social beings. We are human beings who are pack animals. And because the sort of guillotine came down so quickly on that, then we have to now kind of not beat ourselves up over the fact that we and our children are going to respond in quite big ways. And actually, my final point, because I know we've got a lot to get through, but is that, and I interview a lot of psychiatrists and neuroscientists in the course of my work. My passion is to explain to parents how the brain is built, not born necessarily. We build a child's brain and they're shaped by the experiences. And we as parents are far more powerful than we know. And we can do a lot of this change making ourselves. We are talking, of course, when we're talking about the acute end, people will want to seek professional medical help, but we can do an awful lot for our children, and it comes from connection, the relationship, and some of us might feel out of sync at times, and there's an awful lot that we can do that's very simple. For example, I talk about time-ins and 10 minutes a day of play with your child, and actually for teenagers as well, we can make it age appropriate, but just 10 minutes a day to reconnect at the end of a day can make the world of difference. And 1 hour at the weekend really focusing on connection, and play is a hugely healing process that we use in therapy, and it really can, it's what we can do as parents too. That's the thing that we are and can be really good at.
Yeah, I think I heard that a lot when I spoke to neuroscientists about the teenage brain. I think a lot of parents hadn't realized the brain during teenage and new thinking is taken apart and put back together again. So trying to get them to deal with anything is quite difficult, particularly if they're at certain ends of the neurodiversity scale as well. So you are really need to let them work in their way, don't you? Because their brain has been completely rebuilt. Gurpreet, what are you hearing from the people that you are talking to? Because you're perhaps working in communities that are less able to share this kind of intense personal experience. And I think probably, though, what's common to all communities is there's quite a bit of shame around parenting and getting it wrong as well, isn't there? I think the pandemic has made us really feel that a little bit more. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I mean, just firstly, the advice that's been given so far totally resonates with me. I think, definitely, we want to shield our children from change, from discomfort, as mentioned. But the reality is, I don't think we give our kids enough, credit for, being able to adapt in these times. Certainly, we're struggling through times like this. But I think the important thing is where we're speaking a lot to parents about, making sure, as mentioned before, their emotions are regulated. We understand why they're feeling this way. We open the communication with them. It's okay to feel a certain way, but why is this change happening? What do we need to know about it? What is our plan? Like, involving them in this, and modeling that behavior that we want to see from them. But the reality is, as you mentioned, there's so many challenges out there. We're constantly needing to adapt to this. But what we found is online, a lot of support from so-called strangers. Ultimately, there's a lot of collaboration going on. There's so much more in that space now that parents found during the pandemic. Support structures that we didn't even know existed, because we were in our own circles of parents before, where unfortunately there was competition going on, and not the support that we were looking for, but we found it online. So there's so much encouragement there.
Are you running specific support for your community online with your blog and your social media? Is there something regularly you're doing?
Yes, so we have our own parenting club that was launched during the pandemic. So through the adversity, we built a community out there where we have weekly classes, and the community
That's
has
for
really
all
shaped.
age groups.
It's for parents of all ages. Yeah.
Right, that's great. And Carrie, you're running quite helpful, aren't you? So tell me what you're doing.
Yeah, we run 4 meetings a week. 3 of them are for the autism community. We have over 170 families that we work with. And because we know that only 25% of kids that are referred to CAMHS are getting an appointment, and during lockdown, 35% more people applying for referrals, and 17% of our children have special educational needs, and only 0.7% of the NHS budget goes on children's mental health. So if you look at those stats, you have to find the help elsewhere. So I think in many ways we have realised that unless our children are at death's door, they are not going to access help and support. It's just as simple as that. That is what we have found across 4 children. So we know we have to do it ourselves. And so parents, I find parents to be the most incredible, read up, shape-shifting, interested, people, and that for us, that's our community. That's where I get most of my parenting tips, are really from other parents who've tried and tested stuff and have worked through stuff. And exactly as Gurpreet said, you know, if the parents that are actually right there on the front line doing it, there is an understanding there that perhaps you may not get with a professional as great and as brilliant as they can be.
And they can access that via your website, can they? People, if they need to.
Well, yeah, they can, but, you know, there are all sorts of groups all over the place. You know, I'm looking here on my screen, I'm seeing that we're being sponsored tonight by Meta. Facebook has so many groups that you can be a part of. Right. And all of those are just giving tips that are like, my son went into school today, his hair was wrong, and now he's been sent home and he's a school refuser, so it's the worst kind of thing that can happen. And everyone kind of piles in and says, I'm experiencing this is what I did. And the strategies that are out there, there's hundreds and thousands of them. And you will find what's right for your child. I've got 4 children. I've got 4 different ways of parenting. So even in my own house, I've got that going on. And so, you know, it is individualized. That's especially for the special educational needs and disability area. We need that. We have to have that.
And Judah, if I'm a parent listening now and I feel that I'm beyond my skill set, I can't deal with this. And some of the questions actually we were sent, you know, I'm, you know, some families who were trying to get into the system. What would be a first stop? Is there something that they can do immediately if they're not getting the support from their GP, perhaps, or the system as it stands?
Yeah, I mean, it is about thinking about your support systems and the networks of support you can tap into. I mean, that does include family, friends, you know, people within your community. And for me as a parent, you know, I've always had to kind of find those people around me that are good sources of information and, you know, to support me through difficult times. But also, it might even be equally some people within the school that might be best placed for that. I mean, within some schools, they have like pastoral type teachers or Senkos, or even in some schools, it's your school nurse. It's finding the right people that can give you that support that when you need it, but not, you know, it's not everybody that has the knowledge or the information for you at that time. But if you can find those right people within the school community or within even your local community, I mean, like we're hearing today, there's so many different community groups out there. If we find that right place, that's the source I need. You know, it may not be my GP because my GP might not even be able to see me sometimes, but it's about finding those places within the community which work for me.
Now, Kate, one of the things that I learned and have learned from all the experts I've interviewed, and I'm sure you have as well, is that don't panic is quite a good piece of advice for parents, particularly in this more challenging time. But also, I learned about active listening, which was a real game changer for me in terms of parenting my 4 kids. And as Carrie said, they're all very different. And active listening is quite a good skill to have in times of great challenge, particularly with very fiery adolescents, you know, can't go out because of the pandemic or don't want to go out now because they're extra anxious or may feel more anxious. I think it'd be really helpful if someone who's training and working at them could explain what active listening is for parents and how you do it with your children and teenagers.
Sure. So I think I would I think of it as empathic listening. I think we're talking about the same thing, active listening. Essentially, and I had a conversation just this afternoon, when we have a conversation, well, the first thing, if I can get underneath it just very quickly, is when I think we understand that our children's brains are not the same as ours. That's really, I think, one of the most fundamental things that we can understand. This is the light bulb moment for me and why I wrote the book, because neuroscience has shown us that our children, I've distilled it down very quickly into a lizard, baboon, and wise owl. The lizard is the survival brain, same as the brain that reptiles have had for millions of years. The baboon is the social, the emotional engagement. The wise owl is the prefrontal cortex, the problem solving, the thinking about time and empathy and all of this. Well, our children, especially under 5, don't have a wise owl just yet. They have more of a fluffy owlet. So this is why they have problems with, or a challenge with, regulating themselves, because their brain just hasn't developed the capacity for it yet. And the same as you've mentioned with teens, because effectively when the sex hormones kick in, that beautiful wise owl that you and Carrie have been developing with your, you know, with your youngsters suddenly goes, oh my God, I can't cope. The sex hormones have taken over, and they almost regress, and you sort of get that behavior again. So I think for parents, when we can understand the science, which is why I distilled it into this simple concept, because I talk to these big brains with long words and that I even get confused. And I'm like, just let me think of it really simply. When we can look at our children and think, okay, and I call it either for young ones, it's stop snot. Stop is snot personal, observe, and then we can turn it around. So I think active listening, it's very at the core of it, to have empathy, which means I can stand in the shoes of another and really see things from their perspective. We must first start by realizing, hang on, my child hasn't got the capacity that I have, the big world picture. Okay, they're coming from a place of fear and sort of emotional dysregulation. So rather than join their chaos, I have to bring calm. So that's the first step in active listening or empathic listening, is to be able to kind of, when your child says to you sort of, you know, it's all your fault, or, you know, the reason why I'm like this is because of this, or if you're, you know, you've got a 5-year-old that's refusing to do something to put on their shoes, is not to dive in with a defense and try and go into battle, which, you know, our baboons come up and out the gates because we're like, God, we've got to get to school and I've got a meeting to get to and everything. And then we're battling baboon to baboon. That's not going to work. So to take a step back, first of all, and take a pause, however you want to look at it, I call it this stop snot. It's not about me. It's not personal, even though sometimes it feels like it is. But it's just to think, okay, what is going on for you right now that I need to help you with? And when we can bring ourselves back to calm and think, why might my child, who's ordinarily quite a good kid, why are they behaving like that? Might there be something else that's going on? And in that moment where we bring ourselves back a little bit, because I get that it's stressful, I might even share a quick anecdote with you from my husband just the other day. When we can bring ourselves to a place of calm, then we can really listen to what is being said to us. And children do not communicate always with words. They might not have the capability just yet. When they're really in that baboon state, they haven't got the, oh, let's just sit down and let me explain why I'm feeling so rubbish. They can't do it, especially for younger children. Their brain capacity just is not there just yet. So it's really about sitting back and thinking, right, and then asking, first of all, is reflecting back. So active listening, if someone says, I can't do this, I hate my homework. It's like, wow, you hate your homework. That's, you know, that is empathy. Is like, you're telling me that you hate your homework, or whatever it might be. Repeating back, it can actually become the simplest thing in the world, because we don't have to come up with an answer. It's like, you've got to do your homework. Come on, otherwise I'll have the teacher on the phone to me again. Just reflecting back. Wow, you're telling me right now that you're really angry, that you're really sad, whatever it is that your child, once you've taken that moment to really hear and see them, you're able to reflect back and actually mirror, really, and use a similar tone. So don't kind of, oh, wow, you're telling me you're really angry. You're kind of, wow, you're telling me you're really cross about this. And in that moment, you get the limbic systems lining up, and this is all science, and you'll be in sync, and they'll look at you, and then it's the follow-up. Can you help me? Can you help me understand what it is that's going on for you right now? This is for an older child, of course. I'm trying to sort of mirror my language up and down.
Yeah,
but
I think that's the interesting bit, isn't it? The varying age.
Yeah, but I would always say, regardless of age, don't talk in paragraphs and don't ask why. That would be my thing, because asking why is asking a child in a state of dysregulation to use their whys out. So ain't going to work. So it's kind of, can you help me? And that mirroring is going to connect with the limbic system. And that's what's going to bring everyone to calm, because the child's thinking, she might actually be trying to understand here. It's all nuanced, but the point is, don't take it personally, regulate ourselves before we dive in, and really think not what's wrong with you or what's wrong with me and my parenting, but what's going on for you right now that I need to help you with. Because that is what all communication is. All behavior is communication. And in those moments of dysregulation, our children are trying to tell us something, but they just don't have the means just yet. Might not just have
It's that feel with, not deal with situation, isn't it? You need to be feeling with them, not dealing with them. Now, Carrie, one of the things I think would be helpful to parents listening as well is that we do all have children who are very different. Your family is very different. They have incredibly different needs. How do you as a parent, because, you know, we've been through a pandemic, we've been all locked up together, some people have lost their jobs, their whole cost of living has affected them greatly. And then you're living with children with more needs perhaps than other children that need to be looked at and looked after in very different ways, each child. How do you stay calm and patient and look after yourself as a pet carer or parent in that situation?
That's a really good question. And I suppose just hearing Kate speak there, and it's literally what we do as parents, but I suppose we're a little bit more on the cutting edge. So we would have self-harming children, we would have children attempting to take their lives. We have a child in hospital right now. So how we deal with our children in those that are they're really the very edgy ones, I think is to hold that space and to sit with them, you know, sometimes we don't have solutions. I can't stop you from cutting your arm. I can't stop you from doing that trigger warning, I'm sorry. But I can sit with you and I can hear you. And you may not be ready to speak for another 2 weeks yet, but I want you to know that I am here. And the minute you want to talk, I'm here for you. So every day I will go to their bedroom. They'll go, "What are you doing in here? Get out." And I'll be like, "I'm just coming for my 5 minutes. I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to wait for you to talk. And if you don't, then I'm just going to sit." And, you know, to begin with, they'll tell me to leave. And then normally after a couple of weeks, they'll say, "Can we talk?" And then they start asking me to come in their bedroom because they know that I'm ready to hear what they've got to say, however difficult that is. And sometimes it's hard for us to navigate that as parents because that's not what we expected of parenthood, is it? You know, it's not what we weren't expecting to have children that may not live to 16, you know, and that's real. But the most important thing, to stay calm is one thing, but actually staying well in your own mental health is, to me, I look in the mirror every day and I say, I am not depressed. I am not the child. I am not this person. I think sometimes we have so much empathy that we can start almost channeling our child's trauma in order to try and reach them. And I think for us that are in those really desperate situations is to remember that we are separate from our child, to actually create a little bit of a gap so that we can survive this, so that we can remain hopeful, and so that we can find ourselves again, because we're not just parents, we're parents plus a lot of other things. And it's, you know, like I have a badge that, you know, and I'm like, "Do not call me mum. My name is not mum." And it says Carrie. And underneath it says Orson Human. So when I go to hospital, they call me by Carrie because it's important. I've lost everything else sometimes, I feel. So sometimes it's important just to be called by your name. And I know this probably sounds weird in the context of maybe perhaps what you guys are dealing with here on the panel. But for me, these are, and I know there will be parents out there, because I know they're out there, you know, we're here for each other and we know how hard it is, and you are doing an amazing job. And you will get through this, and your child will get through this. So just to remember that. The teens are the very worst. They're hell.
Yeah. Gurpreet, you have 4 children. And we've all been in this place working from home with four children. I mean, it's been, how do you, or how could you advise, from what you're hearing from other parents as well, dealing with that kind of all of them, all of the time, all around you? I mean, as Carrie says, it's good to separate yourself, and your partner as well. How are you dealing with that? What advice have you got?
Wow, I think you've read my mind there, because so many times that's happened to me, where 4 children at 4 different stages of life. So my eldest is in secondary school. She needs validation. She needs to show me, "Daddy, I've done this today. Can you look at this today?" And it needs to be now. Yeah. My other daughter is 7 years old, and we've struggled with her during the lockdown. We're looking at a diagnosis for her as well. She has gone through a lot of stuff through the lockdown. She's really needed us as well. So we've got two boys that are 3 and 1, which physically need us all the time. So at times it's like, Daddy, I need this. Daddy, I need this. And I'm thinking to myself, for my own sanity, like my own breathing is up here. So I'm thinking, how am I going to manage this situation? Everybody needs me at this time. But then, some of the advice that we've been hearing tonight is that, look, I say to myself, look, you just need to get through this, whatever it is that they need at that time. Try to navigate through this, and look, don't lose it. It's easy to say you need to stay calm under pressure, but the reality is we need to look at our children and what it is that they need. And as we were saying before here, look, ask them the questions. Ask them open questions. Don't assume anything. And as Kate was saying, don't take it personal. Like I said, their mind is different to ours. Our body language is so important. And this is the key thing with it. Talking to our children, looking at what they need, being calm, leaning on each other, as a support, getting whatever it is done, and then reflecting on it after. Don't forget about it. Reflect on what happened. I journal. I write stuff down. Look, this happened today. This was chaos. I could have done this better. I reacted wrong like this. And I talk to my children after. I apologize sometimes and say, look, I got it wrong. I'm sorry. This is the key. You have to be able to say that to your children. We don't get it right all the time. But I also say to them, I said to my daughter last night, she'd done something wrong, which upset me. And I said, Daddy was upset. I was upset. That's why I reacted that way. I didn't want her to just think, well, why is he acting like that for? And then we had a conversation about it. So, I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's not the situation, it's how you deal with the situation, isn't it? Because that's what you're role modeling for them. I think one of the other things that has come up quite a lot in the questions is this sense of I've failed, I've handled it badly, I'm ashamed. The word shouty and shouting came up in a lot of the questions. I mean, I always think tomorrow's another day, and as you say, how you deal with it. But Judah, what from your experience counselling, how do you deal with those feelings of shame and failure, and sometimes horror at what you've done as a parent? What would you advise to anyone who's feeling that now?
Yeah, I just think that's about the kind of internal conversation I have with myself as a parent, as a person, as a human being, and being able to say to myself that it's okay to not be perfect at something, and to know that I'm going to make mistakes in things. And that actually, when it comes to parenting, I mean, when I think about when I became a dad, I mean, I didn't have a good template for dad. I mean, my dad wasn't around when I was a youngster, so I didn't have a template. So it's like, what am I building that from? I don't even know what I'm building it from, but I'm expected to be whatever that is, what a dad is. I don't even know what that really is. So I think I've had to learn to have better conversations with myself about what it means to actually do certain things with my kids, or get certain things wrong, or, the next day think to myself, oh, I'm not doing good enough in this area or the other area. I've had to almost pull myself back to a place of understanding that it's okay to find my way in this as well. And just like was mentioned about reflection, I think that's so key about parenting. Most of our parenting is about self-reflection, and then self-reflecting with our kids as well, to let them know that that's the process, that I'm reflecting on what I did and I didn't do right in that moment, and then you're reflecting on what you did, and we've both got to make better choices, and we're finding our way together. And I think there is this kind of growing together idea with our kids in that way. But that's about the internal conversation. I feel that I've had to learn how to do that over time. And I've encouraged other people to do that as well with me. I'm very lucky as well. I've got like lots of close male friends who are also dads, so we talk, and we almost share some of those experiences with each other, and share that conversation where we can learn how to do that together, and then find our way, because most of us didn't have a fatherhood experience which taught us the pattern, whatever that was. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's what I've had to learn.
And Kate, I think the other thing that's important, and I'm sure this is something that you advise, it is to take care of yourself. So that's sleep, isn't it? Trying to get sleep, and maybe prioritizing that, staying really boring, obvious things, staying dehydrated, making sure that your health and well-being is in its optimum as much as it can be, because I know a lot of people have much younger children who are waking up through the nights. But I mean, even when you have teenagers, you are often dealing with situations at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't really end, in my experience, and actually more so
No.
at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So what's your advice to mums and dads and caregivers listening now about looking after yourself? Because I feel guilty when I do that. I know a lot of people do, and sometimes parents are coming in from work and they're immediately dropping straight into parenting, and there's no give for themselves. How do you find it without feeling guilty?
Well, as you say, there is always that sense, but actually sometimes we can make it work for us both. So, first of all, I would say you can't pour from an empty cup. So we should really take that as reassurance that we are going to have more blowouts ourselves when we're tired. So actually that becomes a vicious cycle. So sleep is fundamental. So as an example, when I do my time-ins with my kids now on a Tuesday, I'll walk in from my course and I'm training, or I've had a really big, quite a tough day counselling. And we'll do, and to be honest with you, I'm thinking, oh God, please, I can't do Lego tonight. I'm like almost, but there's a little bit of me that knows that 10 minutes, there's almost a meditation in it. And once you start to get into it, it does come down to calm. But my best tip at the moment, which we've been doing, is readathon, which is the most exciting thing in the world for the kids. And is essentially, I pick up my book, they pick up their books, we all get into bed and everybody reads and they sort of just chat. And because I'm too tired to have even the capacity. But what it means is I'm going to bed super early. I've got the physical comfort of having my kids. I can sniff my son's hair. That is all sort of oxytocin, beautiful sort of opioid building. You all sit there and I'm thinking, I haven't really had to do anything. I'm actually in bed for 8:30. Oh my God, this is heaven. So it's trying to cut ourselves some slack. Can't pour from an empty cup. Get the sleep, because without that, everything else unravels. And finding ways that you can spend time with you. And again, I'm referencing more younger children, but even your teens, just hanging out together, just kind of, even if they're playing a game or something, a video, whatever online, and just go, can I just sit and watch? And can I ask stupid questions? And just where you're coming together, that physical sense of being in the same room, even sometimes our presence is enough to regulate us as it is to them. But very quick anecdote. My husband was with the children. I'm really knackered downstairs going, please just do bedtime. He comes in. I hear this hullabaloo. Clemency's knocked the toothbrush into the loo. Wilbur's, everyone starts laughing, thinking that's really quite funny, because it kind of is quite funny. Wilbur hates, like, you're laughing at me, gets Clemency in a headlock. My husband then freaks out, thinking Clemency's going to smash her head. He'd been having a really nice time. And in that moment, he said, why the bloody hell can't you control your temper? And in his head, he's like, the irony of, like, if anyone's watching me right now, and we both, and again, it's that thing, and the kids are looking, and then everyone starts laughing because he's like, yeah, so Daddy didn't get that quite right. Is being able to forgive ourselves. There's a lovely a scientist whose name escapes me at the moment, and he talks about parenting in thirds. The first bit, we are going to get right, beautiful, everyone's happy. The second bit, we're going to mess up, and then we're going to say sorry, which is a beautiful repair. And our children need that rupture and repair for resilience. That's where resilience comes from. And the third bit, we are just going to mess up. And you know what? To get that, you're done. That's sorted. You're good. Yeah. So I will take his word for it. Forgive ourselves, but get the sleep in.
I'd like to ask a question. I think maybe Carrie or maybe Judah actually, is that, and it came up in the questions asked, that children who've become not classically diagnosed as having anxiety, but have become more anxious since the pandemic. So there's been a lot of kids, and I hear this from lots of the mums that contact me after I wrote the book, who have withdrawn. So would be naturally introverted, and perhaps even at school found that difficult, and that schools always seem to say introverted children aren't, there's something to be dealing with. I think that's an odd way of looking at it, but how do we cope or help our kids if they've become more withdrawn, if they're coming out of their bedroom less and they want to see their friends less, and particularly with teenagers, because that social aspect is a real developmental phase, isn't it? What do you think, Carrie? What would you advise?
That's a very good question. I think that for us, we have what I would call a triangle. At the top of it is the word anxiety. Down in this corner, we've got toleration. And down in this corner, we've got demand. And there is a very strong relationship between anxiety, which is this driving force, which makes our toleration lower and means that placing demands on our children is then more difficult. So with parenting, I think sometimes it's about looking at which part of that cycle you can influence. So looking at how can I try to do things that will lower anxiety. And that there's hundreds of ways that can happen. We could sit here for hours talking about how to lower anxiety.
Yeah.
Is it really important that children do every subject? Is it really important that they have a particular haircut that they have to stick to? Do we just not worry about these small things and focus on the bigger things? What are the really important things? And for us, I think that's the most important thing, to try and find the things that are really important and forget about everything else. And that is, it may look weird to other people. Other people may think, how can you have your children like that? One's got blue hair and piercings. It really doesn't matter. They go to school every single day for 7 hours, and they were out of school for 3 years. So in my world, they're a success. They're incredible. And their anxiety is being lowered. Their toleration's gone up. And now I can place some demands on. With my son recently, who's been out of school since September, I introduced a thing which was do one daring thing a day. Now, for him, that was having his fingernails cut, perhaps, was his one daring thing a day. For other kids, it'll be doing 5 hours of homework. But I'm not at that level, I'm afraid. My stuff is the really small wins. And it's those things that bring joy to my children. Lower anxiety, toleration goes up, demands can increase.
I think the small wins is really important for both young and old children. So I spoke to a neuroscientist and someone working in adolescent mental health in America, and she gave me some really lovely things to do. This idea of writing it down, if your children can't tell you and don't feel they can tell you, that they could perhaps write it down and put that somewhere so that gets feelings out if they're anxious. And we introduced, and I don't know whether Gurpreet or Judah, you would advise this as well, mental health days after the pandemic. We said to our older children, if you really cannot go to school today, if you really cannot face it, we'll give you 3 days a month where you don't do that. We'll talk to the school if it's going to cause more. And on that day, you will rest, and resting will be. Is that something you would advise as well? Gurpreet, maybe?
Yeah.
Look, I think we need those days as well, being honest with you. Where you kind of, like when things go out of alignment, you need to realign with your purpose ultimately. And for us, it's obviously different to our children, but there's no reason why it shouldn't be the same. We shouldn't apply the same to them. To give them that, and look, give them credit for what they're doing. Sometimes, we're not looking at the things that they're doing. We're looking at things that they're not doing, the things we've asked them to do, and they haven't done it. And therefore, we are, what we've built up in our head, that movie script of parenting where, I'm saying one line to them and they need to respond with their line, and they do something else. That illusion that we're living in the perfect. So as mentioned before, look, we need to be looking at progress. So the fact that if they're able to admit to us that I'm having, difficulty with this, I'm experiencing this is happening. Look, what do we want? We want our children to talk to us. That's what we all want. We all want to be our children's friends. So the fact if they're able to speak to us about it, look, and that may look like mental health days for some people. It may look like, going for a walk in the park for someone else, taking them somewhere, doing a hobby, doing something else where you distract. My wife loves doing jigsaw puzzles. She'll just do jigsaw puzzles. And that will be her thing. And look, we need to acknowledge that everyone's different. What works for us may not work for someone else, but we need to be able to adapt to that as well. They're the most important thing at that time.
We also learnt the concept of pot plant parenting, just being in the room not really doing anything or expecting anything of our teenagers. And we started to reintroduce games, which I think was a great thing during the pandemic, card games and things like that. If each of you had one very simple thing that would be helpful to your kids, all ages, whether from teenage to sort of toddlers, what would you say would be helpful for parents to do now? I know parents always seem to be expecting a 10-point list of do this and everybody will be happy, but I think it is about the small wins. It's about that kind of, seeing each of them as different personalities, knowing that their brains are in all different places, stepping back a bit, looking after yourself, and then maybe reconnecting with simple things. Kate, is there something simple that you would recommend? We each do one.
Somebody take advantage of the fact that mummy is otherwise engaged and she's come, but actually it's made me just think that this is clemency, everybody, who should be in bed. But we did just a quick thing about the writing things down. We had code reds, didn't we? So that if anything had happened during the day that maybe the kids would feel a little bit difficult, talking about straight away after school, but they could say to me or leave a code red. Normally they would just say, I've had a code red today. And then it's like, do you want to talk about it now or later? And inevitably it might be later. And it's just those small things that are obviously sometimes really big for our children that we might miss the sort of signals. So having something, whether it's writing it down or having a code red. And what else was it? What was the other question? Sorry, I've been slightly distracted by Madam coming in. What was the other?
Just a small thing that you would advise people doing after the pandemic that might reconnect.
Play. And when I say, and everyone goes, oh my goodness, but maybe I wasn't played. That when I say that, I just literally mean taking 10 minutes and saying to your children, you're in charge, what would you like to do? And then not directing the play, letting them tell us what they want to do, whatever it is, as long as it's safe, obviously. 10 minutes is all it takes. And that's just, we don't have to get right in, but we can just sit there and observe and say, oh, right, so we're going to play this, and just making observations. So play is very sort of different to maybe what we sometimes think, but giving our children the gift of our presence rather than presence.
Gurpreet?
I think one thing that we incorporated at home was like something called safe zone. So, if anyone was feeling anything or they'd done anything or they just wanted to open up, they could call a safe zone. And what that would mean is that they were able to speak in that time, and there was no judgment there from anybody. If they wanted to, open to questions, then that was okay, but they would just leave it there. No one would talk about it again, and we just move on from it. So that's something that we did during that time. That was important, and I think I really agree with what you said. Kate said about playing and whatever they want to do. We give up whatever we want to do. Like, and one of our kids, my daughter said, "I want to play Monopoly," and we was like, with 10 minutes time, we were saying 10-minute slots for everybody. We called it mind, body, and soul time. So whatever they want to do in that time, she said, "I want to play Monopoly." So let's have a game of Monopoly, and we just tried to blitz it as quickly as possible. But I think everyone's been through something during this time. Let's try and do the things that we weren't able to do in that time, maybe.
And Judah?
For me, especially during the pandemic, has been these side-to-side conversations I've started having with my boys, and they're usually one-to-one. And like me and my middle son went for a walk one time, side by side, and I found out more about how he feels about certain things in that one-to-one walking next to each other than I found out at other times. Or like with my other son, if he's playing FIFA and I ask him to play a game against him, we're side by side playing FIFA and he's talking. So I just found out these side by side conversations that I have with my kids are so useful because they're not pressurized, you see, because we're focused on something else. I don't know if it's just boys that like that they're focused on something else, but I know with my boys definitely they like to be doing something else and then they start to talk. And actually, when I think about it, I'm probably quite similar. When I go to my friends, we don't just get together to talk. We go and play a game of snooker or pool, and then we'll talk while we're playing it. So I don't know if it's that, but definitely these side-to-side kind of conversations, have brought so much fruit in terms of understanding what my kids really thinking about certain things. It's just come out naturally. So I would say that's worked for me.
I think with teenagers, side by side is the only way you get any. The eye contact conversations always feel slightly threatening for them, I think. Carrie, what would you say? What would be a one small win for you?
Yeah, I'm going to do two small wins. I'm going to cheat.
Okay.
So my first is that some of us have loved lockdown, and I just want to put that out there. Some of us loved it because it was the first time we weren't judged. We were sitting in our house, and we were a big village in our house, and it really worked. And the difficulty has been integration. And not all of us are pack animals. Some of us want to be alone. Some of us like our own company. Some of us don't want to talk. We don't like words. So it's allowing for all of those differences. That's my first thing. Second thing is strike while the iron's cold. So I think de-escalation, whatever situation we find ourselves in with our children, is to de-escalate in that moment, to really stay calm, to de-escalate. But that doesn't mean we don't resist. It means that maybe an hour later or a day later, we come back and we say, okay, let's just talk about what happened yesterday. And let's talk through that, and what could we have done differently, and how can we find strategies to help you in those moments where it becomes difficult. So yeah, de-escalation and striking while the iron's cold are two of the best bits of advice I've ever been given.
I think that's really helpful. We haven't had time to talk about boundaries as well, and why it's still okay to set boundaries and to kind of have consequences for boundaries that are broken. I think that's really important for parents to have that mindset as well, that it's still okay to be a parent, caregiver, whoever you are, to the child at this time. I want to thank everybody on the panel. It's been so super helpful, really practical, and I hope everyone goes away thinking, I'm not alone, I'm not doing it wrong, I'm good enough, and tomorrow's another day. I think that's always a good thought as well. And while I'm here, and because this has been free for everyone to listen to, and we will put up on the website all the details of all the places and things that we've mentioned and all the resources. If you think you've benefited and you could spare a tiny donation for Beyond, that can be done via text, and it can be as little as £1. And if you text Beyond, BEYOND 70085, we would be really grateful. And also, if you want to donate more or get involved, look at wearebeyond.org.uk. So that's where you find the charity. Thank you very much, everybody, for taking part. It's been so lovely to dip into your family lives as well. And have a good evening.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.